On air. And,
Morning, Chris.
good morning, Barrett. It is a beautiful sunny day here in the Midwest, which is a lovely thing.
Yeah, we'll take that sun every time. It's such a good way to kind of feel better. Sometimes when I'm out in the sun, I kind of feel like, the sunflowers, they turn their head to face the sun, and I kind of feel like, oh, just like a little sunflower here.
Yes. Well, that's our natural inclination. It's kind of interesting how we are starved for light in this realm. If you go and look at the heavens, 99.9% of the appearance of the universe is darkness, blackness, oblivion, and all these little tiny lights scattered across the cosmos are our only source of light. Um, I wonder what it would be like for us to actually remember or recall the fact that in our true state there is no night, there is no darkness, and that we are existent in a realm of pure light that is, by humanly earthly standards, pretty much indescribable. And that kind of is my thought about the Course today, is how as we start to enter into that state of contemplating what life is like in our true state, we have to break down the limitations that this material universe has established in our thinking. So it is a huge shift from a linear cosmos where everything is clearly defined, where everything is, broken apart and isolated, to that idea of living in a state of being that is actually even beyond consciousness and definitely beyond materiality in any form.
Yeah. Well, I like this kind of intro about the universe too, because I'm kind of a space fan. I've always liked that since I was a kid, and this world does reflect the mind, and it seems like it's all defined, but there's always stuff we don't know. And one of the big things that astrophysicists and astronomers are exploring now is what they call dark matter. And what is this dark matter, and what does it do? How does it interact with the rest of the universe? That's kind of like no one knows. They just know it's there, but they don't really know anything about it. And I think it's an interesting parallel to our own minds. We have all these parts of our mind that we don't know. We've kept hidden. We don't see it very clearly. We don't understand exactly how it works. And to me, that's why A Course in Miracles is such a gift, because it points us to these dark corners of our mind. And it says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to look at what you're going to find. You might feel fear, but that fear is not ultimately real. You might not want to face that darkness, but the only thing you'll find when you look is that there's actually no substance to it. And that's an amazing, amazing thing.
Well, I think the other aspect of that is, in this world where dark matter does exist, it is a point of separation, that everything is separate from each other. We are all separate. But most tragically, the ultimate separation, or belief about separation, lies in our separation from God or divinity, or however you want to format it. So as we continue to work with the Course, one of the things that seems to occur in a very natural process, a natural unfolding, is that we begin to recognize that we have never been apart from God, and that, as Jesus had said, we live and move and have our being in God. So that gap between us collectively as well as God individually starts to fade the more we put our attention on affirming and recognizing our connectivity to God. And one of the neat things in the Course is that it gets reiterated over and over and over again. But right now, in yesterday's lesson in the Course, the affirmations that came up are: I am one self, united with my Creator, and salvation comes from my one self. Wow, what a powerful thought that is. You don't have to, everybody's running around with their head on fire, looking for somebody or something to save them. And this one simple statement eliminates all of that madness, all of that insanity, when we stop and affirm that salvation comes from my one self. And that is the self that is, in fact, living within the Christ, that is the Christ. So that's one of the most immediate rewards of A Course in Miracles, is to recognize that the answer isn't going to come with somebody intervening or some magical event occurring that separates you even further. The truth is, yourself, your true self, your Christ self, has the answer for every problem that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really perfectly with our characteristic of a teacher of God of the day. We are on the 5th of the 10 in the Manual for Teachers, and today's characteristic is joy. And I think joy is just that effortless flowing of happiness. It's shared unconditionally, unequivocally. There's no one that is withheld from this joy, and it is that essence of the Christ self. It's in all of us. There's no one who this is missing from, and there's nothing that any of us have ever done that has justified us feeling like we're apart from this. It's only ever a mistaken thought that we're not already in this place of joy. So it really, one of the things I think, like you were saying, that's so good about the Course is that it cuts to the very core of the issue. We look for the problem that needs to be fixed out there, and maybe we fix it, maybe we don't. If we do, there's another problem, or maybe 10 more. It's the way that this world is set up. But ultimately, when we go to that deepest level, when we realize the problem is only ever within us, and that even there it doesn't have the gravity that we thought it did, then this natural, light, happy, playful part of us just comes to the front, and something that we share without anxiety, without worry. It's just our true self that gets shared with everyone that we meet. So I think the question then becomes, well, how come I don't think I want that most of the time? Even if I intellectually think I want it, why am I not experiencing this happiness more?
Yeah, and when we're looking at the idea of joy in this series of definitions, the first sentence: joy is the inevitable result of gentleness. And the idea that we were working with last week was gentleness, and we were contemplating the idea that gentleness is a stance of non-resistance, where you don't create a force that attacks you by placing yourself in an attacked position. So if we are in fact living as we should be, without the expectation or the fear factor of something hideous showing up on our doorstep, the dragon that's always ready to enter the back door and devour everybody in fire, that creature is one that we have imagined. And as soon as we lose our attachment to it, it vanishes, and joy replaces all that apprehension and fear and sorrow. So really, it's that ongoing spiral. It just keeps going around and around and around. And the reality is that in order to claim your joy, you have to lay down your arms. You have to surrender, not to being overwhelmed by the exterior forces. What you have to surrender is your belief in the exterior forces, because, as I stated a little bit earlier, it's all happening within you. You are the key. You are the salvation that you are looking for.
Yeah, and that really brings to mind a story I read in a novel about Buddha. Um, and the story was, after he had been enlightened, he just started walking through a battlefield. And for him, there was no fear, there was no reaction, there was no seeing a problem. He was simply, going where he was led, and sharing what he needed to share, and he wasn't actually hurt, in this process of simply walking in the middle of all these soldiers who were attacking one another. And I think that it just really speaks to the fact that it's never about what's outside of us that determines our state of mind. It's only ever our choice in whether or not we're willing to give our power to that thing outside of us. And when we start to see it that way, then we can start to say, no, I don't want to give my power to that thing. I'm choosing happiness instead. I'm choosing equanimity instead of upset. And that choice is something that we can build upon. Just like when we first start to do a new exercise, we can only do a few reps maybe before we're exhausted. But then, if we stick with it, after a few weeks, we can do a lot more. And, by the end of a month or a few months, we're in a really different place than where we had started. And I think forgiveness is like that. It's an internal muscle that we need to keep choosing that peace so that it can get stronger and that we can use it in more and more aspects of our lives.
Right. And the only way really to get around this whole larger series of conundrums is, in reality, to embrace the truth about who we are and what our life really is, what it consists of. And that is highlighted in the affirmation for today, in today's lesson. And the idea being, I am spirit. I am the Son of God. Nobody can contain my spirit. No body can contain my spirit, nor impose on me a limitation that God did not create. So, wow, that's really astonishingly powerful when you stop and give it some consideration that what God has created is inviolate and eternal, and ultimately will prevail throughout any set of circumstances that is being generated in the world around us. And of course, when we embrace thoughts like that, it collapses in a very immediate way all of the things that our ego is trying to build a foundation of fear around. So you're really, as as people are doing the lessons, you're really getting that input that puts a thought into your mind every day about how to survive in extreme circumstances or just on a day-to-day basis in this realm that we have created for ourselves, our little playground here.
Yeah, it doesn't always feel like a little playground, I guess, but it reminds me of the way that Ken Wapnick would often talk about it as like the sandbox. And if this world is a sandbox, we're actually an adult in a sandbox. And, when someone's unkind, it's like another small child, kicking sand at us. And we can get down into it. We can feel really attacked by it, or we can choose to realize we're able just to stand up. And then, yeah, maybe a little sand hits us in the shin, or you know, something like that. But we can see it doesn't really affect us. It doesn't affect who we really are, because we're not vulnerable to that unless we really want to believe that we are.
Right. Yeah, it's like that old analogy that I often use. A person who's in 3 feet of water, hysterical, screaming, floundering, flapping their arms and legs and screaming, I'm drowning, I'm drowning. And rather than rushing to their aid, all you have to do is say, well, stand up. For God's sake, what the hell's wrong with you? And sometimes we have to give ourselves that kind of dialogue. It's like, what the hell are you thinking? Why are you in panic mode? Why are you allowing this to make you a miserable human being? Just stand up. Stand up for what is truth. Stand up for what is right. Stand up for what is real. And you'll stop drowning. It's an amazing process.
Yeah. As they say, simple but not easy always.
Well, I think it is. I think it is easy if you keep yourself focused on the idea that you are a spiritual being, and that's really where we get into our shallow regions where disaster can occur, where our boat can run amok on the rocks, is when we indulge this idea of, oh my God, I'm not eating organic. What are you feeding me? What is happening here? I need to baby this body. I need to nurture this body. I need to surrender and climb around on my hands and knees in submission to something that is going to dissolve anyway. So trying to preserve the body becomes an act of madness, and better to shift your sense of identity back to your spiritual being early on in the game, rather than going down 10,000 avenues that are going to result in frustration.
Yeah, well, I'm only at 9,954, so I've got I've got a couple more to go.
Yes, it's kind of like the black cat syndrome, If you see the black cat, don't go down that avenue. Well, Barrett, it has been a wonderful morning of sharing thoughts with you. I think that hopefully this will give our listeners some ideas to work with about staying centered in the truth of your identity, and then using joy as that barometer. If I'm identifying with my spiritual truth, if I'm identifying with the Christ within, then I must be in a state of joyousness.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, let yourself know, whoever's out there listening, that you can choose happiness. Sometimes it feels like it's a little out of reach, but even if you don't totally believe it, go for it, because it is always there, and it is something that all of us can experience. So just know that you have many helpers and people supporting and pulling for you. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. The entire cosmos and God itself is conspiring on your behalf. I mean, what more can you ask for, ultimately?
Yeah.
So, well, I'll see you in 1 week. And what are we looking at in 1 week? What is that next step for us? And that is defenselessness.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting theme for the day. But in the interim, continue to practice your joy.
Sounds good, Chris. I will. And I look forward to talking to you in 1 more week.
Great. Have a great week.
Yep, you too.